Hi, and welcome to AntLab Games. I'm your host, Anthony.
And I'm Francis.
And today we are presenting to you
Votes for Women.
For Women.
Yes.
In Women's Month.
Yes, Women's History Month.
So how
Women's
appropriate
Month.
of a theme. So what is Votes for Women? You guessed it. It's a game about women's suffrage.
Yes.
Or earning women going out and earning the right to vote.
Yes, the hard political struggle.
The hard political struggle. Yeah, it was a lot of work. So it was a lot of struggle, a lot of opposition.
Yes.
The period was 1848 to 1920.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of political pushing and posturing and campaigning, and a lot of pressure on Congress. All to get women the right to vote, which we all know how that turned out.
Very important.
Yeah.
Yes.
Women are voting today. And it worked.
It worked out.
So it worked. So not to spoil the end of the game, but in
we'll see.
in this pseudo, replica of this time period,
You're playing through that time period.
Yeah, and you're playing with two different sides, right? Obviously, the suffragists who are pushing women pushing for their right to vote, women and men both pushing for the right to vote, as well as the opposition, which is mostly men, I'm sure, who were saying, the patriarchy, who was basically saying, no, you don't deserve a vote.
Yeah.
But in this game, the opposition can win.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So why don't you go ahead and take us a little bit through what the game goals are, and we'll talk a bit about setup.
Because it's a little bit different, right? So we play a lot of these kind of historical dueling sort of games. If you've played like Watergate, even like Twilight Struggle, kind of reminiscent of that in terms of you're playing through historical events with cards. And we have a couple of end game conditions, I guess you could say. So if you go to the board, you'll see down here we have these Congress spots. So a couple of things have to happen in order for the game to end in favor of the suffragists. Number one, we actually have to get the 19th Amendment into Congress and passed.
Right.
And that's represented on the board by a number of Congress tokens down here, completely filling up all of these spots. Now, the opposition is going to be able to take those away. Obviously, the suffragist player is going to be trying to get those Congress markers out there, because once the sixth Congress marker is placed, that's going to indicate or be representative of the 19th Amendment actually passing in Congress. At that moment in time, some things are going to happen on the board. You're going to kind of have a late game scoring in a way, and we're going to start putting out some check marks and X's to indicate which states are voting for the movement, and
those are voting against it.
Those that are voting against it. So, and then the game kind of continues. Ultimately, the suffragist player needs not only to have the 19th Amendment passed, but also needs to have, I believe it's 35 states.
And I only need 13 as the opposition.
Yeah, and as the opposition, he only needs to get 13 states to say, nope, we're putting a big X on that.
Big X.
Not going to happen. Right. So the way that the game is going to play, that's kind of like our end game. Last thing I'll mention about that is that, should the 19th Amendment not be passed in Congress by the end of the sixth turn, then the game automatically ends in favor of the opposition. So
stall tactics.
Yes,
if
exactly.
You keep the 19th Amendment from being, approved in Congress.
Right, being passed. Yeah.
Being passed, then it never gets out, and the states don't get a chance to vote on it.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
You could play the stall game if
you
you're
could
the
try.
opposition. It really depends on your strategy.
Yes. Now, if you want to talk about setup, maybe talk about the deck, because the deck is seated in a way that's going to give us some historical events late. So, early,
we talked about,
late game.
As we talked about, there is two sides to this game, the opposition and the suffragists. So each side gets their own deck of cards, and within those deck of cards, you're going to have a starter card, and then you're going to have late, middle, and early cards.
There's my start,
And there's my start as well, right? So every player starts with the start card, obviously, and the decks are constructed in late, middle, and early, with early being on the top, middle in the middle, obviously, and late on the bottom. So once you shuffle those three different sections, you place them into your pile, and then you're going to draw 6 cards. So you're going to start with a hand of 7 cards, which will be basically how you come out of the gate, with your starter card being quite powerful, because it's a good way to get your little campaigners out on the board. The suffragists start with two different color. But they put out one of each color, at least in the beginning, right?
Yeah, and I'll talk about mechanics in a minute.
Okay, so for setup, you're gonna set up the deck. You're gonna take 3 strategy cards, place them out on the table. These are really you're gonna be earning these from the second round forward, a second turn forward they call them, and then you're gonna have state cards. You're gonna put out 9 of these and then discard the last 3. These are one-time use cards that you can gain by taking control of certain states as far as area control goes. So now the premise of the game, this is an area control game. But you don't start with anybody on the board, and you'll soon start to get your influence out there as the game goes. So as far as setup goes, it's quite simple. It's just getting the deck set up, putting out the supply of strategy cards, getting out your state cards, and giving each player their respective stack of campaign pins.
Buttons, your nasty
they're
buttons.
Which allow you to do certain things later on. All right, so let's talk a little bit about
Want to talk mechanics?
Yeah,
absolutely. So again, this is an area control game, and you'll see, I can probably show you here, we have a nice little tray of just lots of cubes per any area control game. And I guess what I'll do is I'll show you kind of the starting card, because again, that's a lot of times what you're going to be doing. I just lost my starting card somewhere, but in any case, it's fine. I'll just
show
use
you
this
my
one.
starting card.
Yeah.
Because I didn't lose mine.
That's fine. What that card is going to let you do, and what a lot of these cards are going to allow you to do, is a couple of different things. Either you're going to be able to put your campaigners out on the board, like I know for your starting card, the Patriarchy, right? You'll be able to add a campaigner, and again, it's important to note that the Patriarchy starts and only has throughout the game 2 campaigners to the suffragists, 2 of 2 different colors, both suffragists. And you're going to be able to put that campaigner in a region. So we're divided up by west. We have the plains, the south, the Midwest, the Atlantic and Appalachia, and then ultimately the Northeast. So 6 regions on the board. And you'll put your campaigner in the south regions.
Where it tells you to put it, basically.
Yeah, it tells
so
you
this
exactly
one says add 1 to the south region, so he has influence in this particular region, and then add 1 of my cubes in each state in the Northeast region, Atlantic and Appalachian region. Just basically, it's going to tell you where to put cubes.
Exactly. So what do the cubes mean? So what that's going to do is essentially put your cubes out. Let's just say you had a card that had you put a couple out here, right? Each state can only hold 4 cubes. Okay. The other aspect to this as well is when you're told to put cubes out, you cannot have cubes where your opponent also has cubes. So if I'm told to put 4 cubes, let's say, in the state of Texas, and the opposition already has 2 in the state of Texas, I would first remove those 2 as my first 2 placements, and then I would place 2 in Texas, if that makes sense. So then on a future turn, I could place additional here, and once I have 4 cubes, or the opposition has 4 cubes of their color, or a combined, color for the suffragists, you would then be able to take the state card associated with Texas. 4 is important because
if that state card was available in the game, not every state has a card, and you'll actually you strip out some of the state cards
in
the beginning of the game, so not every game will have the same exact state cards. So you can't always chase the same states.
But again, it's important to note, because for me this was a little bit different in terms of area control, where you're not just throwing a bunch of people, and then like kind of having a battle or trying to figure out who has more control in this one area. As you're strategizing, where am I going to place cubes across the board, you're thinking about who can I remove my opponent's cubes using my cube placing ability, on that turn. So later on in the game, the 4 cubes will matter, because once Congress is completely filled, again indicating that the 19th Amendment was passed, where I have my 4 cubes, I'm going to be able to place a check mark. Those cubes are going to go away, and now Texas is mine. Likewise, if we had 4 in the opposition state, so let's say, what is this, Mississippi, had 4, then when this judgment happens, we go around the whole board, see where everybody's got cubes, and the opposition would get a big X. And that kind of just locks in your control of that area at that time in the game, which is usually pretty late game. So another thing mechanically you want to know, when you have your either suffragists or your opposition out on the board, your campaigners, they're going to go in these sections, as Anthony illustrated a little bit ago. And when you're placing your cubes out, sometimes you're directed, or maybe not directed, you're taking, let's say, a campaigning action, which is going to allow you to put out a number of cubes based on the number of campaigners you have and a die roll, which this game has lots of different dice. So depending on the action you're taking, whether it's lobbying to try to get more buttons, and I'll explain this in a minute, or it's actually putting cubes out for area control, it's all going to be determined, the number of dice you roll is all going to be determined based on how many campaigners you have out on the board.
Yep.
The color of the cubes you put out, if you're the suffragist player, is going to be determined by the color of the campaigner in that region.
Yeah.
And the location of the cubes that you put out is also going to be dependent on the campaigner that you're associating your die roll with. So if I were to roll these dice, I would assign each of them to a campaigner, and then I'd be able to put that number of cubes out in that region in that campaigner's color. If that's clear. So now, what can the buttons do? Let's say I hate this roll because it's a 1, and that's probably the worst, right?
It is.
I can pay, in some cases, for some actions, I can pay a button to re-roll those dice and reassign them. So that's great. I can also pay a button to move the campaigner, and this is either the suffragist or the opposition can do this, to move them to another
region,
area,
yeah.
just any other region. So if I want to start doing some campaigning out here in Appalachia, I can just move my campaigner by spending a button. So in addition to playing your cards for the text on them, which are, again, is going to let you do things directed by the card, placing cubes out, placing people in Congress, that sort of thing, and campaigning, which is rolling dice and placing cubes out where you have campaigners, you can also lobby. So again, based on how many campaigners you have out, you can lobby, roll dice, and get a number of buttons for your folks. So that's kind of it, I think, mechanically, broad strokes. Is there anything I missed?
Yeah, actually,
Okay.
you can also get Congress.
Ah, yes, you can. And I'll be honest, I hate this. And maybe it's indicative of how tough it is to influence Congress, right?
Yeah.
Because what you do when you, and I think I said earlier that you roll for buttons and you don't. You just get the number of buttons based on your folks you have out.
Yeah, you just get buttons.
You just
don't
get
roll for
buttons.
them.
But you do roll for Congress.
You do.
And you will roll one of these D6s, or one of
One
these
per-
D6s for each campaigner you have out.
Yep.
So if I have 2 campaigners out, which you do as the suffragist player for the majority of the game, you roll 2 of these, and for each 6, you get to place somebody in Congress. No re-rolls.
Nope.
So
It's hard.
it is
and it's
hard,
a waste of a turn.
and it is your entire turn.
Yep.
So that's why on your turn, if you have those state cards or if you have strategy cards, they're very similar to the cards you have in your deck. So strategically, it makes sense to, okay, I'm going to take a turn, try to roll for Congress, and also play one of those other cards as my, to just get some stuff out on the board. Because otherwise, you're missing out on a whole turn just doing that and rolling
it's a
dice
steep
for
cost
nothing.
if you don't roll high
Yeah.
enough. Just
yeah.
a couple of little tidbits.
There's a few more things we can talk
Yeah,
about here with
so
the cards. So
on the board, you'll notice in the left corner there's cards in effect for the rest of the turn, cards in effect for the rest of the game, cards in effect for the final voting. Final voting is at the end of the game, but there are certain cards you play for their text, and what that text does, it'll have a symbol on it to tell you if it's in effect for just a turn.
Yep, I'll give you some examples. So like cards in effect for the rest of the turn. There can be multiples here. Like this is the prison tour special. So on the remainder of this turn, roll the D6 instead of this.
It's a D12.
It's a D12, but it only has 1 through 4 on it.
Correct. Multiple times.
When taking a campaigning action. So it just gives you a little bit of a bonus for that turn.
Yep.
See if I can
So there's
find,
stuff
like-
that stay in effect for the rest of the
wars.
game. Yeah, and it's essentially like the
strategy.
Civil War is a card, and that's like that card
Yeah.
it sticks out there. There are cards that play off of those events if they're active. Do you get to do them?
And then final voting cards too.
And then there's final voting cards that'll stick out there for final voting. But which really just what it boils down to at the end of the game is once the amendment is passed and you do all the counting up, and any state that has the 4 influence tokens per player gets the check mark or the X. If neither player, and to correct you earlier, it's 36, not 35 votes. So 36 votes for the suffragists. If they don't have those 36 yet, and the opposition doesn't have their 13, you go ahead and you do a final vote. And the final vote is you basically have a roll off.
Yeah, basically.
And you just roll dice, and the highest roll wins, right?
Yeah.
It can't be tied.
Well, and then so for the final voting cards,
Mm-hmm.
like here's an example, and we both have one that's very similar. It says Miss Feb wins the last vote, so the suffragist player wins all ties during final voting.
Right. So that's a powerful
Yeah.
card for final voting if it gets to that point.
Right.
So
I think you have one that's exactly the same.
it's similar. Yeah, you do have similar cards in your deck, so you've got to really hope that they come up at the right times. You're not using it to do other things.
Yeah.
And because there's some cards that let you burn cards out of your deck and so on and so forth. So basically, it's really just a tug of war on this map of the United States,
Yeah.
where each player is kind of pushing their cubes, taking away cubes, adding cubes, all in an effort to get those 4 cubes of your color on those states, so that you can either claim the state cards, because they're great, they're free plays. You get this card, it goes in your tableau or in your sort of off to the side, and at any point on your turn when you play your action card, you can play another one of these, and they're
Right.
like as powerful as some of your regular cards. So it's almost like getting a free turn.
Right.
And it really is to your benefit to go and snatch up these state cards, and then you do bidding at the beginning of every turn. When I say turn in this game, it means round.
Right,
That is
yeah.
that is something that you're going to have to get a little bit used
Yeah,
to,
it's a
because
little linguistically.
it says turn.
challenging.
You take
Yeah.
a lot of turns, but after you play your 6 cards,
Yeah.
and then it's the end of the round,
The
but it's
turn.
technically
They
the
call it
turn.
the turn,
They call it
yeah.
the turn. But then at the start of the next turn, you're going to bid your buttons on any one of the 3 strategy cards that are on the board. And again, these are more one-time, quick, heavy hitter
Yeah.
cards that kind of like, sway the battle here for dominance.
Right. Yeah.
But that, at a high level, is
so.
and in some detail, is essentially what this game is really all about.
Right.
So I hope that was clear enough for them.
I think so. Yeah.
But I guess
think
at this point we can kind of
Let's talk about our thoughts on this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we've
like
got thoughts.
So we've played this a few times. Got a real feel for the
Mm-hmm.
game. Played it through to the end. See how different endings go, and different strategies, and really kind of gave our thoughts on it. And I think the way we'll start this, and
Yeah.
I think let's talk about it thematically, right?
Right. Okay.
So
Sure.
we are, and I speak, I think, for both of us, we're pretty, I guess, big fans of games that are historically
That's accurate.
accurate. Yes. So historically themed games, especially like real history, not
Yes.
like some sort of fantasy history or some alternate history, but games that actually use like historical events in the cards, a la Twilight Struggle,
Mm-hmm. Right.
a la
Watergate. That's a good
Watergate,
one. Yeah.
like any of those types of games that
Or that other one you got. We haven't played it yet.
that would be Fire in the Lake.
Fire in the Lake.
Right, so those are coin games, they call them, right? But those are more like insurgency types. But
Yeah.
they have
But it's
similar.
still like-
you get a card, you play
Yeah.
it for an event, you do some other things. The cards are typically multi-use. You've got some dice going on, and you've got a lot of cubes on a board, right?
You're kind of like learning as you're playing. Like
Kind of similar,
flavor.
right?
Yeah.
So that alone usually wins us over.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love the multi-use cards, and if you really take the time to read the flavor text and look at the pictures and the events,
Mm-hmm.
and it really does take you on a journey through history during this period.
Yeah.
During this event, right? And
Yeah.
it really gives you sort of like a high-level view of how maybe that tug of war went during that period, and what type of impact some of these events had on the
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
on the country, really. So, what are your thoughts with regards to that?
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be really frank and honest
Okay.
with this.
Why don't you be Francis then?
I'll be Francis and honest with this.
Okay.
'Cause Frank's my dad.
That is true. That is a true statement.
I love the historical aspect of this. When I was reading about it, we were introduced to the game. We were asked to play the game. I'm all over it. Yes, 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 I want to play. We started playing it, the first game, and I was really into it. This was like one of the few games that I actually broke out and got set up while you were doing something else,
is
because
true.
I was so excited about playing it. And I was just like reading through the cards and all this kind of thing, and I'm like explaining it to you. I'm like, this is what we're gonna do. And then we got into like I don't know, we were maybe 45 minutes into the game, and I'm like, I just feel like it's just so much of the same. Like I was waiting for the impact of the mid like cycle cards and and then you get into the late game and I'm like, okay, I'm waiting for like later game cards. And I just felt like it really was such a struggle going.
Not a Twilight.
Not a Twilight struggle, which, and like in retrospect, I'm thinking about it like, was that intentional? Because was suffrage this painful? Probably. But I'm not saying like the game was painful, but going through it from a board game perspective, like I was having more fun and I was having more enjoyment out of reading all the flavor text. Like they give you all this historical stuff in the box.
Yeah.
I want to take a moment to look at this stuff because
tchotchkes,
you've got like Votos para la Mujer. This is like, why do we vote? Like it's all in Spanish, so you can see the campaigning that they were doing with the Latino community. And we have like, population tables, men and women, like states recently defeating suffrage at the polls. And it's got like all these historical things, lettergrams and just real stuff. Like I felt like I was in a museum learning about this important period in history and loving it.
Yeah.
But I'm like, can I just read this stuff and not play the game?
That's a bold statement.
It's a bold statement, but it's true. So
Okay.
I didn't, and I want to say like I didn't enjoy it because I enjoyed it, but only to a point. And then at the end of the game, I will say my favorite part of the game was at the end of the game when we did have the 19th Amendment in Congress and we're kind of going through the states and rolling for state control. Because what you're doing is you're rolling for state control, and it's really, like you said, a roll-off or something like that. So you're kind of rolling who gets the, better die roll sort of thing. But you can spend your buttons as a suffragist player to re-roll. So I had, like, at the end of our games, I always have this, like, giant stack of buttons, and I'm always wondering, like, should I be spending them to move my campaigner into a different area? Am I not doing the placing of the cubes the right way? Maybe I'm not. But it just seemed like a lot of like anytime I would go put out cubes, it was all over the place. Like it's like place a cube in every section of the board. So you get to put one in like every state in the Midwest and then also all over the board. So you're just like placing lots of cubes, and then your opponent goes and they place a lot of cubes. They usually take the cubes away that you placed, and then you place more cubes, and then they place cubes, and it's just like more and more
This is a game
cubes
of placing and taking cubes
for like 80 minutes.
Yeah.
And then the last 10 minutes is really exciting because you're like, yes, I finally got Congress to ratify this thing, and now we're going to roll off and see who wins.
Yep.
But you don't really feel from like minute 5 through that point that you're doing anything really, like mechanically. At least I didn't. So here's the deal.
Okay.
These are my thoughts. I'll let you talk in a second, but it's Women's History Month,
That's
so
true.
I'm
So
going
you
to
do
go
all
on
the
about
time.
this.
You can just go on. I'll put the camera on you.
Okay, that's fine. Perfect. Thank you. So it's not to say that I didn't enjoy the game itself, because I think that the game has a lot of merit, and I definitely want to keep it and I want to play it with like the girls, you know what I mean? As more of an educational tool, as a historical thing, we can kind of go through and see, read the cards, because the cards have so much flavor and text and history. And I can tell that there was a lot of research and passion and skill put behind putting all of the theme together. But from a board game perspective, if you stripped the theme away, this is not one that I would pull out on like game night and say, all right, strategy gamers, let's play area control for 90 minutes. There's other games that I'd probably pick for that purpose.
Okay.
So
That's good.
I think that kind
fair
of
statement.
summarizes my thoughts. It was a long way of saying, it's bittersweet for me. And not many, I haven't, and again, it's a challenge because I think my expectations are, this would sound terrible. My expectations are usually so low now for games that we play.
Lately, it
that
has been.
if I am impressed by a game, it's because the expectation's kind of lower and I'm like, meh about playing it. And then we play it and I'm like, oh, actually, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
But in this case, I was so excited about it.
Yeah.
And then I was like so disappointed by the gameplay. Yeah. So I'm sorry.
It took her a little longer to get to that point than it did with me playing this game.
I know. I was holding on.
She was
like,
really,
it's
really
it's
wanting to
good.
like this game.
I'm like, no, it's gonna change. It's gonna shift. It has
Yeah.
to shift. Wait till we get
So-
to the other cards. It
Yeah,
just never
and
happened.
I'll go through my experience. with
Okay,
this
sounds good. Okay.
now. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So, in a nutshell, you're playing through this game. You've got early, middle, and late cards. You expect there to be some sort of a ramp up.
Yeah.
It doesn't really happen. The
It
ramp up
doesn't,
is
yeah.
minuscule at most.
Yeah.
The cards themselves, there's a nice thick stack of cards, so you expect a lot of variety and actions here in the text.
Yeah.
There's not.
Right.
So you either can, like from an opposition perspective, like your cards are basically remove a token from Congress and put 2 guys on this state, put 1 guy in each of these states in this region, or put some guys over on this region, or discard this and draw a bunch of cards and then play 1 for free. Like that's literally all the cards you get to use for this many times, right? So with that said, I was expecting every time you play this, you expect things to happen, like bigger events to come, like really impactful things to happen in the late game. They don't. They get slightly stronger, but otherwise the entire game is literally just pushing cubes here and then pushing cubes here and pushing cubes here. From an opposition's perspective, the game is punishing because intentionally these are underpowered compared to the suffrage players. They are
True.
because you have to get
However,
36
I have to
states.
get 36 states,
And
exactly.
that's what I'm saying. I'm not
But
saying
it's not fun.
it's not fun because
right. Or rewarding.
like I
in-game,
said,
right?
I usually get to impact 3 or 4 states where her cards are like, put 1 cube in every state. And it's like, what? So then her turn is instead of putting out 50 cubes. And I'm like,
It is,
are you
yeah.
kidding me? Like, am I ever going to, like, I will go and I'll push like 3 turns to get like 2 or 3 states. And then she'll just take them all the next turn. And it's like, wow, her cards are really powerful. And so, look, I think that's the way it's designed. But from an opposition perspective, like, regardless of theme,
Right.
like each side of the table needs to have a balance, right? And I think this side of the table gets punished in this game, even though your goal isn't as high. It's
You still
you just
win.
feel
though.
like you could still, like I did still win,
Yeah.
but you could still you just feel like you're really slogging through mud to get there,
Right,
And
yeah.
and from a gaming experience, that's not fulfilling for me.
Right.
It's just not rewarding enough, right?
Right.
I really wanted to like this because, like, I said I love history games. I think the theme, the cards, the attention to detail, the production, all of it's wonderful and spot on, right? If I were to rate it based on that, I'd be in the high yellow,
Yeah.
low greens, right? Because I
Right.
think it just hits that sweet spot of beauty and history and value, right? But if you were to base this purely on the game mechanics and fun, this would be low yellow, balancing on red. Would I keep this in my collection only for the theme and the
Yeah.
historical aspect from it? As a game, it wouldn't stay.
Yeah. I
That's
agree with
just-
that.
that's
No.
just the
I
reality
agree
of
with that too.
Like, I wouldn't play this again, personally.
Yeah. I say the same thing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, because we
Right.
really want to like this game.
Like I said, I would play it with like the girls when they get a little bit older.
Yeah,
or
I think
something. You know
it's
what I mean?
it's a good tool, and it'll probably stick around for a while because it's a good tool for the girls to learn this type of stuff. It's a
well,
great
I
way
mean,
to learn
and for
history.
all the kids. I
All
mean,
the
not
kids,
just
yeah,
the
not
girls,
just the
but
girls,
I
everybody.
mean, but it's cool as a woman to go through and be like, oh, this is something that's part of our history,
Yeah.
and it's important, and it's something that we take for granted because we were not part of this movement.
Right, and this isn't that long
You know what I mean?
ago, right?
It's
Like,
not. No,
if
it's
you look
really
at
not.
the time
We're
period,
looking at like my grandparents' generation,
Yes,
I guess
it's-
great grandparents' generation. So
it's about 100 years ago
Right.
at the tail end of it,
Exactly.
which isn't really it's not
Exactly,
a ton
yeah.
of time. This
Yep.
is it's still somewhat fresh in
Right.
that like 100 years ago,
Yeah.
women couldn't vote, which is
Right.
kind of ridiculous when you think about it, like in today's standards, like
Yeah.
that's unheard of.
Right.
But this is reality, and it's good to really to have your kids learn about this stuff. It's
Yeah.
important.
So I would say, I guess we've kind of gone on about
Yeah, I
our
think
thoughts.
so.
I think that kind of sums it up. I would have loved to see more of a deeper strategy in the
Yeah.
implementation, with all the same, quality of
Yeah,
historical
yeah.
context and all of that.
If
kind
there
of thing.
was more unique cards, action cards
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
within this deck, I think the game would have been a lot
or
more
I would
enjoyable.
say, or a shorter game.
A shorter game, yeah.
Because I think that if this were like 3 rounds or 4 rounds, and you're getting through your deck quickly,
I agree.
it's enough to be like, okay, we get to immerse ourselves in the historical piece,
Mm-hmm.
and we're sort of playing through just to kind of be in the experience. It's kind of like being on It's a Small World. Like
Yeah.
you're there, you're experiencing it, it's fun, but it's not like the thriller ride, I guess. You know what I mean? But yeah, like if it were shorter, and then that would also be more palatable.
I think by
for,
the
like,
fourth
families
round,
and
you're
stuff.
ready to end it.
Yeah.
And you've got 2 full rounds
to
12
go.
more cards
Yeah.
to play, and you're like, whew,
Yeah, you're
okay,
sort of
man,
just
like,
like,
wow.
okay, this is
I mean, there is strategy. Don't get me wrong. There is
is.
strategy
Yeah.
here in the placement of it.
Right.
But it's just, there's no real like planning because the other player can immediately just knock your
Yeah.
stuff gone. Like
Right.
you could do this, like I would make these huge swing moves, and then she'd wipe that whole region out
Right,
in one shot. And
That's
I'd be
what I have. Like,
wow.
here, I'll read you one of the cards. Hold on a second. I have
Yeah,
the.
it's kind of
yeah.
ridiculous.
Roll. This is make a home run for suffrage. Roll 2d8s.
Yeah.
Say so 1 through 8. Remove that number
of
of
my
red cubes anywhere.
anywhere from the board.
No
So
more than 2 per state.
She could roll technically 16
Yeah.
and move
Which I
16
think
of
I
my
did
cubes off
one
the
time.
board. Like it's just like what?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
It's hard to-
playable if war in Europe is in effect. Add 10 cubes anywhere, no more than 2 per
It's-
state.
that's-
So
those-
I was just
like,
putting out like massive amounts of
this
cubes,
deck doesn't have cards
but
like that.
still didn't win. And I think
Yeah.
that's the part that's like.
That's the part,
But that's the. I guess that's the struggle.
right?
I guess,
but that's
but
not.
anyway.
It's not for me. Not to say that others won't enjoy this. Like
Yeah.
maybe there's people who enjoy that whole push and pull and just
Yeah.
moving cubes. But for me, I need a little more than just pushing cubes.
Right, from a game standpoint.
From a game standpoint.
Okay, so let's do a rating. What
Yeah.
would you rate this?
I would rate this low yellow just because I like the historical context of it, but it's definitely on the back end of my collection.
Okay, yeah, me too. I'm saying low yellow. We're moving soon. This is probably going in storage.
Right. So
And
I think it's a good indicator, right? We're
It
moving.
is, right?
We have 600 games in our collection.
we're downsizing.
We're taking 100 with us to
Temporarily,
our new home.
Right,
This won't be in that 100.
right, yeah. Because we probably won't be playing it in the next like year.
Yeah.
Or something.
So
But
you
but yeah, but I will keep it. And I would say from a like women's history standpoint, if I were going to pull out a game to play, women's history, I like Her Story
yeah.
is another good one to check out. So I would definitely check this out, especially if you're looking for something historical or educational in the classroom.
Yeah.
This would be fantastic.
Right. Because
Right?
it's
Non-gamers.
real easy to teach.
You're learning about stuff. You can see it happen. You can kind of watch it play out. But as an educational tool, 1,000% green light.
Yeah.
As a board game, yeah.
Yeah.
we're
If
yellow for
if
me.
we had a separate educational game section,
Yeah, which maybe we will.
this would be
Yeah.
green in that section.
Yes, but we don't.
But we don't. But if we have a limited amount of space on your shelf for games,
Yes.
this just doesn't appeal to me enough to
Yep.
want to be in the collection. That's all.
All right, cool.
There you have it. We hope you enjoyed the video. We hope you got our take on this game, and you learned a little bit more about it. It may be for you, maybe it's not.
Yeah, let us know.
Let us
so
know down below.
if you have any questions about it, let us know in the comments below. We always love to engage with you there and hear your thoughts and
Yep.
answer your questions. Anything else?
Yeah. So if you like what we do and you want to support us, go join us on AntLab Games on Patreon.
Yes, our patrons did get to watch this being
They
played.
got to
by
watch
the
us
way.
play one of our games live. So
Yes.
that's what they get to do. They get to watch our live playthroughs now.
Yeah.
So go support us there. Join our Discord. All the links are down below. We appreciate you all, and thanks for watching. We hope to see you next time.
All right, we'll see you.